Morning everyone. To whomsoever this may concern, this is a demonstration of how to run your models from different companies and their R&D teams into your local system through REST APIs in our local applications. The reason being is to go through with the manual setup download of hosting your own models on your own server is because one, they can cut down on the commercial cost of companies that are charging you per, let's say, token or per word, per phrase, whatever that is, and how easily and flexible it will be to just basically change the model and run it on your own servers. The cost of that would be significantly less though. And similarly, it will also ensure that your data stays within the company rather than you sending it to some API and it using it to train upon that API data that for the newer models or new generation. So what I'm going to go through is Ollama, which is a application to run different models in your system locally. So what it does is it downloads the models in your system locally that you can run through a hosted server, which can be called through a REST API. Also integrated through Docker and other content management systems as well. Uh, or CI/CD that is going to be involved in the later process. So I'm going to go through Llama. I'm going to demonstrate what Llama is, what it does, and how the hosting services is going to work indiscriminately, and how easily it will be able to integrate our applications into it. Right. So as you can see, this is the Ollama website, which is again developed by Meta or Facebook for an easier bit of understanding. They have different models over here which you can integrate in their application and download locally. Right. Now, these are some of the models. Similarly, you have models for visuals and then tools and whatnot. Right. So if I go into the model section, this is what I have. It shows what is the parameters, which is like, let's say for Gemma 3, I have a vision model, or a vision model. It's a vision model, which has 1 billion parameters, 4 billion parameters, 27 billion parameters as well, right? What it is, how it's gonna run through the command of the Ollama application, and its evaluation, its benchmarks, everything is there, right? If not, you can look for the same on Hugging Face as well. So if I'm going to through Gemma model that is there over here, right? So we have the same models which is available on Hugging Face. Now, this is developed by Google, and I'm sure it will probably require some sort of login or token authentication. But this is just for example's sake as to what I'm going to show through this application. Now, I have an Ollama server running for me locally, right? So what I did was I configured Ollama in my personal device, which is my own laptop. So as you can see over here, I downloaded Ollama, for which it provides you a setup. You download it and you give it your first command, which is Ollama run or Ollama serve, whichever you prefer, right? So then you type in the model that you want to run. So once you have selected the model, it will show you, it will run that model for you, and you can run that in your command in your computer CLI or the CMD, for example, for that matter, and also give you the options to prefer which models you want to run and change in between them. Now, while it is convenient to run your models in your CLI or through your command or PowerShell or whatnot, you want them to basically run on a server, right? Or basically through some API call where you can even select these models. So now, if I go to the GitHub part of this, like they have so conveniently given us. right? Say they have given us as to how to get up and running Llama 3.3, DeepSeek R15, for Gemma 3, and other large language models. This is the code for the application. These are the models that they've recommended. And along with that, they've also provided the specs that you require to run these. For example, if I want to run Llama 3.1 with only 1 billion parameters, which is about 1.3 GB, it's good enough to run in my local system. So it won't require that much RAM or hardware specifications for a person to run locally. Yes, the problem is that certain models cannot be run locally. For example, DeepSeek 671 billion parameters 404 GB model, which is a very heavy model, and probably I don't think even 64 gigabytes of RAM can even cover it. Okay, so earlier when I was running the 49 billion parameters, the specifications for that, and which I forgot to check up because I actually ran it, and I have a whole code dedicated towards it as well, a Jupyter notebook dedicated towards it. The problem was that it requires an RTX GPU, NVIDIA RTX GPU to run a 4090, which costs around like $1,500, and 24 gigabytes of VRAM from that particular graphic card. So yes, it's very heavy, it's very costly to run, which I didn't look into. I should have. So to run these models as well, respectively, you need the specific requirements as well. So right now I have two examples ready. One is Llama 3.2 and the other is Mistral, right? And similarly, I have given the Ollama commands to run them respectively. If you want to look for a specific model which is not in the specifications or the list that they've provided, right? You can always look up in the website and search models and see what is command to install them. It's mostly Ollama run and the model name that is there. Now, so I have one Python code over here, right, which is basically calling the URL and trying to get a response from the Mistral model that is there. So what I can do is I can just check the model, I can define my role, the content that I want to relay, which is my query over here. So imagine our end users variables through the form that we're going to accept it via the API. We're going to send it through here. Instead of some just sending it through some other server or any other manner, we're just going to send it through here, right? We're gonna get the response code through this Python API or any API for that matter. It doesn't necessarily need to be Python because that's the whole point of you hosting it on a REST API, right? How I've hosted it on a REST API is I've used a command, and it also gives you the benefit of selecting the models that you prefer, right? So what we have is this, and we're gonna run this, right? So the current content that I have is what is Python, right? For which I have already some content over here. So I'm gonna go is something different. Now this is Mistral running right now. I can also run Llama 2.0. Or let's say what is Java. Okay. So this is the code I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna save. I'm gonna run this locally. It will take some time, but let's give it a shot, right? So this is an LLM running locally in my system, and it shows that how people can use it to like basically solve their complex problem. Let's say for code generation. So generate Python code, and let's say if you require the higher models for higher instances of accuracy, we can always go with that, but then the hardware resources for hosting that would be much more. So it can be costlier to host them. So in that case, I would recommend going through the commercial API, which is there. So in this application, we're going to go with both the approaches. So that is at least some part of it with will be the flexibility part will be given in our applications, and it will save the company a lot of money, time, and resources. So uh, generate Python code to request let's say data from uh, URLs. Okay, so this is the command we're gonna go with. So it's giving me the entire Python code. It's generating that for me. It's understanding the complex tasks that I have asked it to do so, and it's generating that for me. So earlier, the models that I was going with was basically developed by NVIDIA over the Llama 3.3. Now, this is a different Llama. This is a 3.3 version of Meta LLM developed by them. And then NVIDIA made a overhaul model on top of it. So, which is again available on Hugging Face if I can see that. So, if I go over there, so it's known as Llama 3 underscore 3 Nemotron Super 49 billion parameters version 1, which requires the RTX 4090 that I was talking about and 64 gigahertz of video RAM. But trust me, it's going to be worth the investment if we have that kind of computing resource, which we can host it on the Amazon workspaces or Amazon servers or even Google servers for that matter. Uh, so idea is to integrate our own models which are commercially available for usage. And the reason I'm going with the local download is that you can actually change the parameters of the model so that they react towards how you want them to react. For example, temperature means how accurate or how creative you want the model to be. So let's say 0.6s means be 60% creative. Okay. I don't want that all the answers should be very strict or restricted upon the areas of this. And this is a good part because on the data side, if you see, on the privacy side, if you see, you want you want the data to be clear, and you also don't want it to be handled by any third party company. In this case, Meta or what do you call it, Google or Microsoft or anyone for that matter, even OpenAI, right? And let's say if you have private data and you don't want any hallucinations with private data, you can always set the temperature to zero, like we have in Sidekick. If Deloitte data is selected, set the temperature to zero so that it won't hallucinate at all. Yes, then again, it's also gonna affect the results respectively. But this is just for one model. We can affect the parameters of one model, right? And this is Python code that they've provided with through the transformers package that comes along with it, right? So similarly, if I'm able to get a simple Python generated code on my VS Code CLI or VS Code terminal for that matter, right? Now imagine me running the Python API connected with the UI side of things with Angular or React or whichever front end JavaScript framework we want to go with, right? Because it's RESTful API, so it can run with any application on the backend for that matter. Uh, and we can integrate this with our with what the user wants. Now, I understand like how will we give the users the option to select different models that they want. So for that one, you may need to install the models first. So for that, we can run the CI/CD pipelines, right? The models will give them the flexibility. Like some might be good at some task. For example, Mistral is good at code generation. Similarly, we can also choose the same model with different parameters. For example, I choose Gemma model, but then I go with the 24 billion parameters or 8 billion parameters of it, right? Rather than going with the 2 billion parameters or so. So if I go over here, there is Gemma, there's 1, 4, 12, and 27. So instead of going with 27, I can go with 12, which is fairly enough for daily usage. But if I seriously want more accuracy or more input into things, I can always opt for the 27 one, which can be hardware wise a bit heavy, but it can get the job done. So once we have all of this in our way, so let's say we instead of writing a Python code, I write a C# code, right, to call the API and model. We also have ready-made code provided by the Meta team of Ollama, right, to create UI or HTML UI integration. So let's say someone has created code which we can download it from GitHub where they can choose the model, the history, along with delete or save the chat, which is what we want in our applications for them to authenticate on the basis of the history of the end user. I think this is worth investing into because, in a long term sense, your dependency on commercial AI agents is going to be reduced or ultimately turned redundant because of the amount they cost. The general selling point of all the commercial agents is that you are not a technically advanced person, right? So thereby, I'm giving you an option to pay me the money so that I can host the models that I have trained or I've you trained for commercial usage that you can use it for your daily task or purposes, right? But we are technically informed people, and I think this is the better approach for it. Okay, that's it for the time being, right? If you have any questions, please do let me know.